Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're going to take a slow, ulcer-ridden stroll through one of the most terrifying medical tragedies of the Renaissance, syphilis. That's right, no battles, no revolutions. Just your body, quietly unravelling, one pustule at a time. So grab a blanket, maybe a hot drink, and prepare to gently descend into a time when romance could kill you. Mercury was considered medicine, and your nose might just fall off before you turn 30. Before we peel back the layers, literally in some cases, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if calmly narrated medical horror is your bedtime vibe. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to see who's listening from around the world. Now close your eyes, take a slow breath, and prepare to slip into the Renaissance, a golden age of art, music, and sexually transmitted rot. Congratulations, you're infected. You don't know it yet, of course. No one does, not for a while. But something invisible just changed the course of your life, and it did so with all the subtlety of a polite handshake and a warm smile. You're alive in the Renaissance, that grand rebirth of learning and beauty, where geniuses sculpt gods from marble and scholars write treatises on the movement of the stars. All while the streets still reek of human waste, and corpses are wheeled out daily with as much ceremony as yesterday's soup. But sure, enlightenment. You've just enjoyed what passed for a romantic encounter in your era, probably in a tavern, possibly behind one. It was passionate, spontaneous, and deeply unwise. And now, tucked inside your bloodstream, is something infinitely less poetic than the sonnets say. Treponema pallidum, the bacterium responsible for syphilis. It's small, spiraled, and it has absolutely no intention of leaving you alone. In fact, it's about to ruin your health, your reputation, your sanity, and, if we're being honest, your nose. Of course, you won't feel sick right away. That's part of the charm. The early symptoms are subtle. A tiny sore, maybe a bit of fatigue. Nothing you'd associate with a creeping, decades-long descent into biological chaos. That's what makes it such an effective destroyer. You carry on living, working, sharing meals, kisses, and maybe a few more regrettable nights. All the while, syphilis is multiplying quietly, building its empire within your flesh. The Renaissance doesn't know how disease really works, so your chances of catching this in time, or treating it effectively, are roughly on par with surviving the Black Death by holding your breath. And no, there's no cure, not a real one, not yet. What you'll get instead is mercury, lots of it. You'll rub it on your sores, steam it into your lungs, or let it drip from your teeth. You'll lose hair, teeth, and probably your mind, but at least you'll be able to say you tried. After all, you're a Renaissance citizen. You believe in balance, of humours, of stars, of bodily fluids. You believe that illness is a punishment, a test, or a message. But mostly it's just rot wearing a very patient disguise. You're about to walk through every phase of this ghastly journey, from hopeful lover to stigmatised outcast, from masked sores to mental collapse. This is your slow, irreversible unravelling, served one lesion at a time. Art may be flourishing around you. Philosophy may be blossoming. But beneath it all, there's a steady, skin-crawling reality. You are not getting better. You are, in fact, just getting started. The year is somewhere between 1495 and 1600, depending on which dusty corner of Europe you've decided to rot in. You are living in what historians will later call the Renaissance, a glorious gilded age of discovery, invention, and artistic triumph. You, however, are mostly just cold and itchy. The art is beautiful, yes. The music is sublime. But the streets smell like fermented excrement. The drinking water contains things that would make modern sewer inspectors weep. And medical knowledge is still firmly rooted in astrology and bloodletting. Chamber pots are emptied into alleys with all the ceremony of tossing out a dead chicken. Rats have established a robust urban presence, and fleas are simply a part of daily life, like hunger or religious guilt. You bathe infrequently because many believe water opens the pores to evil vapours. Soap exists technically, but it's expensive and often contains ingredients that double as livestock dewormers. Your teeth, if you still have them, are stained, jagged, and perpetually aching. Dental hygiene is performed with a cloth, a prayer, and the occasional sliver of bone used as a pick. You live in a world teetering awkwardly between medieval superstition and something vaguely resembling progress. Printing presses are churning, universities are sprouting up, old ideas are being challenged in smoky lecture halls filled with men who think bathing is optional, but quoting Aristotle is mandatory. There are anatomists dissecting corpses in public, painters smearing oil onto canvas with glorious aching detail, and philosophers writing earnest treatises about the soul, right before dying of dysentery in their 30s. And then there's medicine. Medicine in the Renaissance is a fascinating blend of imagination, guesswork, and good intentions soaked in vinegar. If you're sick, your doctor might check the colour of your urine against a chart that looks like a medieval painter's palette. He might consult the stars, slice open a vein, or prescribe a compress made from rosemary, dung, and wine. You might be cupped, leched, blistered, or scalded, all in the name of balance. After all, the body is ruled by 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And if you're unwell, clearly your biles are feuding again. Now, despite this less than hygienic wonderland, most people aren't constantly ill. They're just intermittently ill. Colds come and go. Sores appear and vanish. Fevers sweep through towns like gossip. But then something new arrives, something strange, unfamiliar. It spreads fast, ruins bodies in strange and horrifying ways, and doesn't care whether you're a shoemaker or a bishop. It starts with a sore, then a rash. Then, if you're very unlucky, and you are, it turns your bones into sponge cake, and your brain into a haunted theatre of delusions. This, of course, is syphilis. Syphilis isn't the only disease in town, not by a long shot. Plague still rears its head every few decades. Tuberculosis is lurking in nearly every breath. Smallpox is carving out new generations of pockmarks. Leprosy is fading but not gone, and typhus is waiting in the dirty linen. Childbirth is often fatal. Open wounds are invitations to gangrene, and even a toothache can spiral into death by jaw infection. But syphilis is different. New, exotic, dramatic. It doesn't just kill, it performs. And it does so with flair, drama, and a lingering, dreadful patience. By the time you notice something is wrong, it's already in motion, and you're far from alone. Syphilis arrived in Europe sometime around the late 15th century, most likely via the Columbian Exchange, yet another bonus gift from a new world that also introduced chocolate, tobacco, and colonialism. Soldiers returning from the Siege of Naples in 1495 were among the first recorded European victims. They came home victorious and covered in ulcers. The disease spread rapidly from there, riding on the backs of armies, sailors, and every travelling merchant who thought bathing was optional, and brothels were not. In many cities, it becomes an epidemic. Public health measures are crude and mostly ineffective, usually just signs warning people not to fornicate, or proclamations banning infected persons from public baths, which were already halfway to being cesspools anyway. There are whispers of divine punishment, rumours of curses, and widespread attempts to blame foreigners, prostitutes, and the stars. Everyone is a suspect except, of course, the doctors, whose treatments will, in time, make things even worse. You don't know any of this yet. Right now, all you know is that things feel slightly off. Maybe you're tired more often. Maybe your joints ache. Maybe there's a sore that refuses to heal, and your breath smells Wrong. But life continues because in the Renaissance, feeling vaguely unwell is the baseline human experience. People are born into pain, live through exhaustion, and die before they can finish paying off their burial shroud. So you carry on. You attend mass, you visit the market, you exchange coins, gossip, and germs in equal measure. You laugh when you can, love when you're able, and sleep when the rats aren't rustling too loudly. And somewhere inside your bloodstream, the spiral-shaped bacteria are getting comfortable. They have plans, big ones. Syphilis is climbing the social ladder of misery, and you, lucky you, are about to become its next grand exhibit. It starts with a bump, not a dramatic one. Just a small, painless ulcer near your genitals. A little raw spot, barely noticeable, and certainly not worth mentioning to anyone. After all, this is the Renaissance. You have bigger problems, like the rotting floorboards in your house, or the street dogs that keep trying to eat your shoes, or the fact that your neighbour just coughed up blood for 3 days and no one thought it was unusual. A little skin irritation that barely registers. You assume it's from friction, or maybe the wool undergarments you've been wearing for too many days in a row, or perhaps it's the price of passion, a minor inconvenience for a fleeting moment of pleasure. Everyone you know has something wrong with them. A rash, a boil, a cough, a limp. You're surrounded by people in various states of decline, and you're taught not to make a fuss, especially not about anything down there. The sore doesn't hurt, which is part of its quiet cruelty. It simply appears one day and refuses to leave. It doesn't grow, doesn't throb, doesn't ooze, not yet. It just sits there, a red flag with no one around to read it. Eventually, it fades on its own, disappears as suddenly as it arrived, which is, in your mind, a good thing. Problem solved. The body heals. The soul is pure. No need to overthink it. Except, you don't feel quite right. You start feeling a little more tired than usual. Your joints ache, but so do everyone's. Maybe you're working too much. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the air. Your physician is always going on about corrupted air. You light some incense, eat some garlic, and mutter a prayer just in case. After all, disease is a moral thing, a spiritual imbalance. Surely you've done nothing that bad. You only visited the brothel twice this month. Then comes the rash. It's faint at first, a scattering of red patches on your chest, a few spots on your back, nothing alarming. But soon it spreads, down your arms, across your legs, into your scalp. It itches, but not constantly. Some days it flares, other days it seems to fade. You scrub harder when you bathe, which is not often, and when that doesn't help, you apply whatever your local apothecary recommends. Vinegar, ashes, ground rose petals, even urine. The Renaissance is not picky about its skincare routines. You start getting strange looks, at the market, in church, at home. No one says anything outright. It's rude to comment on someone's affliction. But you notice the hesitation, the quick glances, the way people leave a little extra space between you and them. You are becoming visible in the wrong way. Marked, suspicious, maybe even sinful. And worse than the rash are the sores, new ones, mouth ulcers, cracks at the corners of your lips, a tenderness in your throat. Your breath smells different, sour, metallic, faintly rotten. You chew cloves to mask it. People still notice. And then comes the hair, or more accurately, the lack of it. You begin shedding it in clumps, from your head, your eyebrows, even your beard starts looking patchy and sickly. Your appearance is changing, slowly but surely. The man in the mirror, or the reflection in the nearest puddle, more likely, looks worn, hollow-eyed, damp with sweat. You wonder if it's just aging, a hard winter, maybe melancholia, but part of you, a small gnawing part, remembers that first sore, the one that seemed so harmless, and it whispers that something is very, very wrong. You finally ask someone, quietly, privately, if they've seen anything like this before. They nod, slowly, gravely, and they don't say the word, but you hear it anyway. It echoes in your chest. the French disease, or perhaps the Neapolitan disease, depending on who you're blaming this week. The names change depending on the border. Everyone agrees it's someone else's fault. It spreads through bodies like a ghost, latching onto lovers, wives, servants, and midwives. Some get sick, some don't. No one knows why. But once it chooses you, it stays. And what it's doing to you now is just the second act. You're not dying yet, not visibly, but you're being rewritten from the inside out. You try remedies, boiled herbs, mercury ointments, bleeding, prayer. Some of it helps briefly. Most of it just makes you feel worse. But what else can you do? See a physician? He'll scowl at your rash, frown at your swollen glands, and offer a vague Latin phrase that translates roughly to "you're doomed." And then he'll hand you a jar of something greasy and grey and tell you to rub it in twice a day and avoid excitement. The worst part is the silence. No one talks about it. Not directly. Everyone knows someone who has it, but no one has it officially. It's a whispered thing, a cursed thing, and you're now part of that club, one of the chosen, the blemished, the quietly rotting. You still go about your day, wearing a high collar, keeping to the shadows, nodding politely in public. But under the fabric, beneath your skin, something ancient and merciless is tunneling its way deeper. And it's only just begun. You don't stop living. Why would you? The sores are manageable. The rash fades in and out. And frankly, you have more immediate concerns. There's bread to bake, debts to avoid, and lice to pick out of your linens. You don't feel well. But then again, who does? You can still walk, talk, and eat. You're still you, mostly. A little paler, a little more fatigued, but nothing that would keep you from the tavern, or the market, or the occasional warm body. Life goes on, and so do you. The disease goes with you. Every conversation, every shared cup, every late-night encounter, it's all an invitation. You don't know this, of course. No one does, not yet. The Renaissance doesn't really understand germs. Contagion is still a vague idea, mostly blamed on foul air, bad smells, or divine punishment. Illness floats in through windows, or seeps up from the ground, or drips from the stars. If someone gets sick after touching you, it's a coincidence. Or maybe you've angered God together. So you keep interacting. You shake hands, you kiss cheeks, you whisper secrets, you flirt, you sweat beside others in crowded churches and cramped feasting halls. You hand a crust of bread to a hungry child. You visit a lover in the dim corner of an inn, fingers still cracked from work, lips already tingling. You aren't reckless, just human. You crave warmth, company, reassurance. You want to feel like yourself, even as your body quietly disagrees. And syphilis, clever little guest that it is, takes every opportunity to spread. The bacterium is a master of disguise. It lives in your blood, your saliva, your skin. It hides in plain sight, waiting for contact, for warmth, for the intimacy of unwashed hands or an open sore. It passes through kisses, shared cloth, bed linens, and the kind of closeness that Renaissance society frowns upon publicly but tolerates privately. And once it finds a new host, it starts the whole process again, silently, patiently, almost politely. A sore, a rash, a decline. You're not the only one. The disease is spreading fast. It shows up in soldiers, students, priests, fishwives, noble women, and bakers' sons. No one is immune. Whole towns are murmuring about it now. Not openly, of course, well, that would be indecent. But the signs are there. More people wearing gloves, more veils, more scarves, more strange ointments smeared beneath layers of perfumed powder, whispered prayers, burned linens, bathhouses shuttered for repairs. The apothecaries are thrilled. Business is booming. They sell mercury in every form imaginable. As an ointment, a vapour, even a lozenge to suck on, while praying you don't vomit blood. Herbalists offer dried roots with names like devil's tongue, and saint's bane. Some sell charms, bones, or tiny glass bottles filled with the tears of widows. None of it works, but it gives the illusion of control. You try them too, of course you do, because hope is stronger than knowledge, and cheaper than despair. Still, the signs get harder to ignore. You start seeing others who look like you. The sunken eyes, the trembling hands, the half-hidden lesions. You nod at each other in passing, an unspoken recognition. You know, and they know you know. The brotherhood of the blemished. Some people try to cover it up with makeup, thick white paste made of lead and vinegar, but it only makes the sores more startling, more grotesque. A rotting face behind a painted mask. And then there are the pustules. Not the tidy, discreet ulcers of the early stages, but angry, bubbling clusters of infection. They show up on your chest, your thighs, the back of your neck. Red, swollen, painful. Sometimes they break open and scab over. Other times they fester, leaking pus that smells faintly like metal and shame. You bandage them, or you don't. What's the point? It's not like you can afford to stop working, and no one's offering you a sickbed and a servant. At some point, you begin to realise that you've become something else. Not just sick, contagious. You're aware distantly that others might be catching this from you, but it's hard to care. You're exhausted, you're scared, and in the quietest hours of the night, you begin to wonder whether you even deserve to get better. Maybe this is a punishment, a lesson, a biblical consequence. You think about who gave it to you, or who you might have given it to, but the list is too long and too sad. You don't stop living, you can't. But you do start shrinking, avoiding eye contact, standing farther apart, washing your hands a little more when you can find clean water, sleeping on the floor rather than sharing a bed. You start to whisper your own name, as if the sound of it might bring back a version of yourself that wasn't rotting from the inside out. But the world doesn't pause. The city continues to breathe and bustle. People are still born, still laugh, still marry and sing and shout. The disease moves among them, carried in whispers and caresses, hiding in lovers and prayers and dirty straw mattresses. And you're part of that motion now, a carrier, a cautionary tale in progress. You didn't mean to become a public health disaster, but here you are. And the pustules? They're just the beginning. The secondary stage doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just settles in, like an unwelcome tenant that stops bothering to knock. One morning you wake up and your pillowcase is smeared with something you'd rather not examine too closely. Your lips sting. Your throat feels like someone dragged sandpaper across it. You run your tongue across your gums and discover a small crater where smooth tissue used to be. Ulcers have bloomed in your mouth like poisonous little flowers, and no amount of wine is going to rinse them away. Then comes the rash, again. Except this time, it's not a polite scatter of blemishes. It's a full-blown map of agony, stretching across your torso, down your back, and along your thighs. The colour ranges from mottled red to an angry, purplish brown. Some of it flakes off. Some of it oozes. All of it itches like hell. You try not to scratch, but you do. In your sleep, while walking, while talking to the baker, until your skin is a patchwork of bleeding scabs and stained linen. You start to smell faintly of rot, but you convince yourself no one notices. Of course people notice. Renaissance society isn't exactly kind to the visibly diseased. If you're lucky, you'll be pitied. More often, you're avoided. If you're employed, why, say, as a cook, tailor, or anything requiring proximity to other humans, you're either quietly dismissed or asked to work from a distance, which is tricky when your job requires hands, tools, or a face not actively falling apart. Your scalp joins in the rebellion. Pustules form in clusters, raised and throbbing like tiny boils filled with fire. You can't wear hats anymore without seeping through them. When your hair falls out in tufts, you attempt to brush it off like dandruff, as if your body isn't staging a full mutiny from the neck up. The people who once greeted you with smiles now offer uneasy nods, or worse, avoid you altogether. Your name is still spoken, softly, carefully, and often followed by a long pause and a sigh. And yet, you still try to keep up appearances. Everyone does. You wear your best doublet, the one with the brass buttons and the least amount of lice. You dab rose water behind your ears, even though your ears have started to flake at the edges. You apply the makeup. Everyone's doing it. Thick layers of white lead to hide blemishes, scarring, or the signs of slowly succumbing to whatever new plague is in fashion. The lead feels cold and heavy on your skin, but it covers the pustules well enough, assuming you don't smile or speak too quickly. The irony, of course, is that the very substance you're using to mask your disfigurement is also killing you, slowly, invisibly. Lead poisoning is a quiet affair. It brings headaches, tremors, memory loss, all things already being generously provided by syphilis itself. You are rotting from the inside while camouflaging the outside with a layer of chemical warfare disguised as elegance. Still, outward appearance matters in this world. It always has. You keep showing up, to work, to church, to meals with your family, because if you stop, people will know. And if people know, then they'll talk. And once they talk, you'll become a story, a cautionary tale, another name whispered with lowered eyes and half-hearted prayers. You'd rather be ignored than become infamous. Your joints start to ache more. Some days, your knees crack so loudly, you're convinced you've stepped on a twig. Your hands tremble. Writing becomes difficult. Carrying anything heavier than a loaf of bread feels like lifting wet stones. You begin walking with a slight limp, which you explain away as a twisted ankle or old war injury, even if you've never seen a battlefield. People give advice, terrible advice mostly. A woman at the market swears by nettle tea. A friar recommends confession and a month of abstinence from salted meats. Your cousin suggests you be bled under a full moon while reciting the Lord's Prayer backward. You nod, you smile, you thank them. And then you go home, scrape another crust off your lips, and try not to scream as your scalp bleeds onto the pillow again. Despite everything, there are still moments of almost normal. You eat, you rest, you laugh once in a while, usually when someone makes a joke about the neighbour's goats. But everything is clouded by a slow, suffocating dread. The face in the mirror no longer looks like you. It looks like someone wearing a costume of you, sagging, hollowed, broken in places you can't name. Your body is still technically functioning. You're not dying, not yet, but you're definitely transforming, and not into anything poetic or inspiring. This isn't a metamorphosis, it's erosion. You're being undone in layers like a fresco left out in the rain. You don't know how much of you will be left when it stops, or if it ever does. But you keep going. What else is there to do? You smile with ulcerated lips. You button your nice doublet over the rash, and you walk out the door, pustules and all, into a world that's already pretending you don't exist. Eventually, the sores, the rash, and the chronic fatigue push you into something resembling action. You've tried patience. You've tried prayer. You've even tried staying sober for a full day, which felt like a personal sacrifice worthy of sainthood. But none of it helped, and your face looks like it's been in a losing battle with a fireplace. So you do what any desperate Renaissance citizen would do. You seek professional help. Not from a doctor per se, but from someone who wears a lot of robes, owns jars filled with suspicious powders, and has a beard that smells like cloves and failure. The apothecary. The apothecary listens to your symptoms with a kind of distant, scholarly interest, as if your weeping pustules are the subject of an upcoming lecture, not a thing currently attached to your skull. He nods wisely, strokes his beard, and disappears into a back room that smells of mould, vinegar, and half-finished regret. When he returns, he's holding a jar. Inside, a dull grey paste, glistening faintly in the light like bad fish skin. Mercury, quicksilver, the cure of choice for syphilis, and one of the more confident mistakes in the history of medicine. You're told to rub the paste onto your sores nightly, preferably before bed, and to sleep with a cloth wrapped around your face to trap the healing vapours. You do this. The result is predictable. Your skin burns, your gums swell, you begin drooling uncontrollably. Your pillow turns a disturbing shade of rust, and by the third morning, you've developed a persistent metallic taste that makes every bite of food feel like licking a coin. But according to the apothecary, these are all signs that the treatment is taking hold. You're instructed to continue. The next phase is worse. You're invited, which is to say, firmly told, to undergo a mercury steam bath. You're placed in a wooden cabinet with only your head poking out the top, like a sad, scabby jack-in-the-box. Beneath you, heated stones are doused in mercury powder and herbs. The fumes rise up around your naked, inflamed body, while your feet cook gently in buckets of warm water. The steam stings. Your eyes water. Your breathing becomes laboured, but you're told to endure, to sweat it out, to let the poison drive out the poison. After the bath, your skin peels, your lips split, your mouth feels like it's dissolving. You're advised not to eat hard bread. You do anyway. It crumbles like glass against your swollen gums, and you bleed into your supper without comment. The healing process is nothing if not dramatic. You ask how long you'll need to do this. The answer is vague. A few weeks, maybe months. It depends on your constitution, your sins, your willingness to suffer. You are given a mercury tonic to sip between treatments, just in case the topical application and steam haven't saturated your bloodstream enough. It tastes like old nails and regret. You drink it anyway. Hair loss increases, your jaw aches, your memory begins to slip in strange little ways. You forget names, you misplace objects. You start to confuse dreams with conversations. You wake up convinced you've already died. The apothecary says this is not unusual. The body resists purification, he explains, as he hands you another jar of death disguised as medicine. You nod, mouthful of sores, and pay him with coins you can barely count anymore. Mercury is popular because, unlike most Renaissance treatments, it actually does something. You feel it working, or at least you feel something happening, which is more than can be said for the various herbal teas and smoked goat bladders your neighbour recommended. The logic is simple. Syphilis is poison, and mercury is a stronger poison. Therefore, the mercury will win. What this ignores, of course, is that you're still the battlefield, and yet for all its horrors, mercury was the best they had. It might slow the progression of symptoms. It might clear up the rash, temporarily. It might even send the disease into remission, fooling you into thinking you're cured. But the truth is, it's a grim compromise. You might live longer, you might not. You might survive the sores only to be left with trembling hands, decaying gums, and a mind so fogged with confusion that your own name feels foreign. You begin to wonder whether the disease is worse than the cure, or whether they've simply become indistinguishable. You shuffle through your days in a haze of sweat and metal, your skin slick with unguents, your breath sharp with fumes. You avoid mirrors. You flinch at touch. You carry the scent of chemicals wherever you go, a walking alchemy experiment with an uncertain outcome. The people around you are starting to notice, even if they don't say it. You can see it in their eyes, that mix of pity and caution, like they're waiting for you to either recover or disappear. You're no longer a person with a disease. You are the disease, clothed in flesh and regret, still mobile, still talking, still hoping, but unmistakably marked. And through it all, the apothecary keeps prescribing. More ointment, more fumes, more potions that taste like melted roofing nails. He never promises a cure, just progress, movement, effort, And you cling to that, even as your gums bleed and your thoughts scatter. Because what else is there to do? You're already poisoned, might as well keep going. What causes syphilis? In the Renaissance, that's not a rhetorical question, it's a civic pastime. Everyone has a theory, and none of them are based on anything that would hold up under even the gentlest scrutiny. Some blame bad air, the kind that wafts up from swamps or hangs heavy over crowded cities. If it smells foul, it must be sickening you. You're told to burn aromatic herbs or carry a pouch of lavender under your collar to purify the air, as if rosemary will scare off a bacterium. Others are convinced the disease is a result of an imbalance in your humours, the four great bodily fluids that dictate all human health and personality: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one? You're doomed. Not enough of another? Equally doomed. A red rash, clearly a sign of overheated blood. The treatment? Bleeding naturally. A friendly physician will happily open a vein or two and let your life force drip into a ceramic bowl, while offering reassurances that this is a proven remedy, by which he means he's done it before, and that patient only screamed for 10 minutes. The religious have their own explanations, and they're not subtle. Syphilis is, according to most sermons, God's punishment for lust, vanity, and the sort of unwholesome activities that happen behind taverns or in poorly supervised monasteries. Your sores are proof of your moral failure. Your ulcers are divine wrath made flesh. If you want forgiveness, and ideally a functioning face, you're encouraged to repent. Visit the church, light a candle, whip yourself in public, ideally while reciting psalms. It won't cure you, but it might distract everyone from how badly you're deteriorating. Meanwhile, astrologers have charted your decline in the stars. Born under Venus and Mars, of course you're sick. Those planets are full of heat and desire. A deadly combination. Saturn in retrograde. That explains your gum decay. Mercury rising. Ironically appropriate. You are offered talismans, lunar timing for bloodletting, and detailed charts mapping your fate according to celestial alignments. None of it helps, but at least it sounds impressive when the barber surgeon mutters something about the influence of Jupiter upon the spleen. Some recommend dietary cures. You're told to eat more figs, or fewer figs, drink goat milk, or avoid it entirely. One person swears by a strict diet of barley and pickled turnips. Another insists on daily fasting until you're cleansed. You try a few of these regimens, mostly out of desperation. At best, they make you hungrier. At worst, they give you cramps and diarrhea to go along with your pustules. Then there are the more dramatic cures. Leeches are a popular option. They're applied directly to your open sores or placed near the temples to suck out corrupted blood. It's unpleasant and leaves you woozy, but it provides the illusion of intervention. One particularly innovative barber straps a frog to your abdomen and tells you to leave it there overnight. The frog will absorb the disease. In the morning, the frog is dead. The barber nods solemnly. You, of course, still have syphilis. If you're wealthy, you might be sent to a retreat, a country manor, a religious asylum, or a healing spa built over sulphurous springs. There you'll bathe in mineral water, sweat in stone chambers, and be dosed with exotic powders from distant lands. You'll be prayed over, sung to, and in some cases, chained to a wall for your own good. Monasteries in particular offer a variety of spiritually inspired treatments that range from mildly ineffective to borderline torture, isolation, fasting, forced silence, all to purge the sinful rot from your soul, and ideally, your skin. If you're not wealthy, your options are more limited. You stay home and make poultices from whatever's in the garden, garlic, onion, mustard seeds, and apply them to your sores with trembling hands. A local healer offers you a tea made from boiled bark and beetles. You drink it. You vomit. You try again the next day. Eventually, you just stop asking what's in anything. You'll try anything. You have tried everything. And none of it works. That's the common thread here. Despite the charts, the leeches, the mercury fumes, and the enthusiastic application of frog therapy, you're still sick. The pustules remain, the sores deepen, your joints ache, your mouth tastes like rust and sadness. You begin to suspect that not only does no one know what causes this, no one even knows what it is. The theories swirl around you like smoke, each more confident than the last, all of them useless. But you still keep trying. Because what else is there? Giving up isn't an option. Admitting that your body is being slowly consumed by something no one understands is not something your psyche can bear. So you keep applying the ointments, drinking the teas, reciting the prayers. You memorize the theories, argue about them in the tavern, debate whether it was the soup or the stars that did this to you. In truth, none of them are right. The real cause, a microscopic, spiral-shaped bacterium, won't even be discovered for another few centuries. And by the time it is, you'll be long dead, likely buried in a shallow grave, wrapped in whatever rags you didn't bleed on, and remembered, if at all, as that poor soul who must have done something wicked. But for now, you cling to the rituals, the bleeding, the purging, the prayer, because if the cure doesn't help, at least it makes you feel like you're doing something. And in this time, in this place, that's the closest thing to hope you're going to get. At some point, around the time you've stopped trying to hide the fact that your breath smells like scorched copper and your eyebrows are falling out, you begin to notice a change in how people look at you. Not just with concern, not just with fear, but with something sharper. Judgment. A quiet sort of revulsion, like you've committed a crime by existing. Because in the Renaissance, syphilis isn't just a disease, it's a verdict, and you've been found guilty. It doesn't matter how you caught it. A one-time mistake, a desperate night, a marriage bed, a partner who lied, none of that interests anyone. What matters is that you have it, and having it is enough to prove you're impure. Diseased, yes, but more importantly, morally diseased. In the Renaissance worldview, sickness doesn't happen randomly. It's punishment. For lust, for sin, for being the kind of person who deserves to be unwell. Syphilis, especially, is treated like a scarlet letter carved in flesh. You're not just sick, you're dirty, tainted, lesser. At first it's subtle, fewer invitations, a wider berth on the street. The priest no longer offers communion directly into your hands. Children, who once followed you in play, now stare from doorways. You hear your name whispered in sentences that end in long, meaningful silences. Friends become acquaintances. Acquaintances become strangers. People don't call you cursed exactly. They just start behaving like you're contagious in every possible way. Socially, spiritually, maritally. If you're a man, the shame bruises your ego. Your chances at respectable employment start to wither. You may still find work, but only the kind that keeps you at a distance. In cellars, in alleys, behind counters. You're less welcome in churches, less trusted in guilds, and completely unwelcome in any conversation involving marriage prospects. No one wants a son-in-law who leaves stains on the furniture and brings shame to the family crest. If you're a woman, it's worse, much worse. Your reputation is no longer just bruised, it's obliterated. Your body is now a scandal, and your future is closed. No man will marry you, no family will let you near their daughters. Your name circulates like a rumour, wrapped in pity and disgust. You're marked, ruined, and written off. Your choices narrow to two: join a convent or quietly vanish into the back alleys, where other discarded women linger in shared disgrace. Women are judged more harshly not because they suffer more physically, though they often do, but because syphilis is considered an outward sign of inner corruption. A man with syphilis might be a cautionary tale. A woman with syphilis is a warning sign. Even if you caught it from a husband, even if you were faithful, you're still at fault. Because Renaissance logic loves nothing more than blaming women for things they didn't do. And it's not just society whispering, It's the institutions. The church, of course, has opinions. You're encouraged to confess often, and with great shame. Monks and priests may counsel you gently, but behind the curtain they're tallying your sins in spiritual ink. Some even suggest you take vows, not for God, but because a life of chastity is the only acceptable outcome for someone like you. Celibacy becomes your penance, your only redemption. Never mind that you didn't ask for any of this. Then there's the state. Some cities start keeping lists, quiet ones, records of the infected, not official decrees, but private notes passed between officials, guild masters, or physicians. If you try to marry, your name might surface. If you apply for work, someone might remember that your cousin's neighbour once saw you limping outside the bathhouse with a suspicious rash. Word spreads faster than the disease. The stain doesn't fade. You try to explain once or twice. You say you didn't know, that it wasn't your fault, that you were tricked, that you thought you were safe. But no one listens. People don't want nuance. They want distance. They want to believe it could never happen to them. That you somehow earned this because if your suffering is just random, then theirs could be too. And that's a far more terrifying thought. So you learn to stay quiet. You stop explaining. You shrink into yourself. You speak less, keep your eyes down, fold your hands neatly, and try not to bleed on anything important. You dress modestly. You wash often. Not that it helps. And when people do speak to you, you nod, you smile, you pretend not to notice the way their eyes flicker to the side of your mouth, where the latest ulcer is trying to heal without being seen. There's no coming back from this. Not in the eyes of society, not in the eyes of your community. You could survive, you could heal, you could live for 20 more years, but the label will cling to you until you're dead, and maybe longer. You're no longer just a person. You're a warning, a consequence, a whisper, a face people remember with discomfort. And even as your body tries to recover, in slow, painful increments, your place in the world does not. The damage isn't just physical, it's social, it's spiritual, it's permanent. You're no longer simply a person who has syphilis, you're a syphilitic. And in Renaissance Europe, that means your story has already been written, whether you survive it or not. If you're lucky, and let's be clear, you're not, the sores fade, the rash dries up, your ulcers scab over. For a while, you start to think maybe the worst is behind you. You're not better exactly, but you're not actively dissolving anymore. You can walk down the street without people crossing themselves. You're still exhausted, still sore, still vaguely rotting from the inside out. But compared to what you've just been through, it almost feels like healing. This is what they call remission, a period of quiet, a lull in the storm, a lie. Because syphilis isn't done with you. It's just biding its time, digging deeper, slipping into the darker, more permanent corners of your body. You've had the primary stage with its charming little sore. You've had the secondary stage with its spectacular collection of rashes and ulcers. Now it's time for the main event, the tertiary stage, a slow-motion horror show that doesn't end until you do. The symptoms don't return all at once, that would be too merciful. They creep. Your joints begin to ache in new ways, sharper and more persistent than before. Your knees pop when you stand, your fingers cramp while holding a spoon. Your back throbs like a rotted beam in a collapsing house. You try to stretch it out, to massage the pain away, but nothing helps. It feels like your bones are being gnawed on from the inside, because they are. Then come the gummers, soft necrotic tumours that grow wherever they please, on your liver, your skin, your bones. They're not content to sit quietly. They swell, rupture, rot. One forms on your leg. It begins as a lump, but within days it's an open wound that never closes. You wrap it in cloth, then more cloth, then stop looking at it altogether. The smell is persistent, sweet and spoiled, like rotting fruit left too long in a sunlit cellar. People avoid standing downwind. Another gummer forms in your mouth. It starts in the roof, near your molars, Then it spreads, eating through tissue until it reaches the bone. Your speech slurs. Eating becomes a chore, and then an ordeal. You switch to soft food by stews, porridges, wine if you're lucky. But even that becomes painful. Your teeth loosen. One falls out into your bowl. You stare at it for a moment, then quietly scoop it to the side and keep eating. Hunger trumps dignity now. Then your nose collapses, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically. The cartilage decays, the bridge sinks, and one morning you wake up and realise your face is no longer where you left it. Your reflection stares back with a hollow cratered centre where a nose once was. The air feels colder. Your breathing is louder. Everyone pretends not to notice. You stop looking in mirrors entirely. The rot spreads. Slowly, thoroughly. Your limbs weaken. Your balance falters. Your skin becomes fragile. It tears at the slightest pressure, and bruises bloom like ink stains across your arms. Your clothes begin to stick to your body, especially in places where sores are leaking. You wash less, not out of laziness, but because water stings like acid and soap burns like fire. The smell never fully leaves. You try herbs, perfumes, vinegar rinses. Nothing masks it. It's the smell of decay. You carry it like a shroud. You begin to isolate, not because you want to, but because the world quietly makes that decision for you. Friends stop visiting. Family members keep their distance. Your employer lets you go, citing vague reasons about your health, your aura, your unpleasant effect on customers. You nod, pretending to understand. You go home, lie down, and try to remember the last time someone touched you without flinching. Sleep becomes fractured. Your dreams are fevered, erratic, filled with teeth and blood and corridors that never end. You wake soaked in sweat, mouth dry, tongue sticking to your gums. You no longer remember what normal felt like. Pain is now your baseline. Discomfort is expected. Any moment without sharp, searing agony feels like a small gift from an uncaring God. And yet, your heart still beats. Your lungs still fill with air. Your body somehow refuses to give up. You continue to function, if barely. You eat, you move, you endure. That's the worst part. You endure. You're not dying quickly. You're decaying slowly, in full view of the world, or at least the few people who still acknowledge your existence. Death would be a mercy. This is just maintenance. Tertiary syphilis isn't interested in your schedule. It works on its own timeline. Sometimes it strikes the organs, sometimes the skin, sometimes the bones. Every victim's decline is a little different, like a grotesque fingerprint. For you, it's a blend, a buffet of horrors. The gummers come and go. Your joints stiffen more each week. You limp, you mumble, you forget. Your face warps into a mask you no longer recognize, and your body becomes a monument to slow destruction. No one tells you you're in the final stage. No one knows enough to name it. They just call it long illness or chronic weakness or the pox again. They don't understand what's happening inside you, and honestly, neither do you. All you know is that your body isn't yours anymore. It belongs to something else now, something insidious, something that moved in quietly years ago and never left. You are a ruin still pretending to be a house, and the wind is starting to howl through the cracks. At first, it's just little things. You forget a name, you misplace your spoon, you start a sentence and can't remember where it was going. This could be normal. After all, you're sick, exhausted, and have been slowly decaying for years. Who wouldn't be a little foggy? You chalk it up to lack of sleep, to the pain, to the mercury fumes you've been inhaling since your apothecary decided to pickle your brain in quicksilver. But the lapses grow. You begin repeating yourself. You start telling stories you already told, insisting you haven't. You misremember details, people, places, entire conversations. Then the gaps widen. You walk into a room and forget why. You lose hours in the middle of the day, staring at the wall, convinced only minutes have passed. You forget to eat, or you eat twice. You begin confusing dreams with memories. One morning you wake up crying over a dead dog you never owned. Your loved ones, or whoever's left, don't catch on right away. People assume you're just tired, or perhaps a little odd from all the suffering. And this is the Renaissance after all. Eccentricity is practically fashionable, especially among those unfortunate enough to be visibly sick. You're not mad, you're troubled. You're spiritually burdened. You're in a contemplative phase. Nobody panics, not yet. Then the delusions begin. They're small, almost charming. You start hearing whispers when no one is in the room. You see shadows move out of the corner of your eye. You convince yourself a man on the street called your name, though he clearly did not. Your dreams bleed into your waking life, vivid, surreal, and increasingly disturbing. You find yourself laughing at nothing, crying at sunlight, and talking to things that aren't there. At first, you try to hide it, but eventually, the line between pretending and believing starts to vanish. Paranoia creeps in like a fog under the door. You become convinced people are watching you, whispering about you, conspiring to harm you. You check the windows, you check the locks, though you don't remember ever having locks. You start keeping a knife under your blanket just in case. You accuse your neighbour of poisoning your bread. You accuse your priest of sending you cursed looks during Mass. You accuse a dog of reading your thoughts. Your body is still falling apart, of course. The gummers, the ulcers, the pain, that doesn't stop. It just fades into the background as your mind begins to scream louder. You lose track of time. Days slip past like spilled water. Sometimes you don't know what season it is. You forget your age. Your name starts to feel foreign. You say it aloud over and over, like a spell that no longer works. Eventually, people do notice. You're too loud, too strange. You walk through town muttering to yourself. You shout at windows. You spend an entire evening in the square trying to convince a confused horse that it's your brother. The neighbours stop making excuses. They don't whisper anymore. They cross the street. They tell their children not to look at you. You have become something to be feared. Not just sick, not just shameful, but unstable. And the worst part, there's still a chance they'll blame demons, or sin, or the stars. Anything except the fact that your brain is literally being eaten alive by disease. You have what later generations will call neurosyphilis, but for now, you're simply mad. Perhaps God is punishing you for your sins. Perhaps a spirit has taken hold. Perhaps you're cursed, touched, damned. Either way, you are no longer fully human in the eyes of your community. If you're lucky, someone brings you food. If you're unlucky, someone calls a priest. The local clerics or healers may try to restrain you, not out of cruelty, but because they don't know what else to do. You may be chained to a post, you may be locked in a cellar, you may be taken to a monastery where the cure is silence and starvation. They may beat you, pray over you, bleed you, or leave you to rock back and forth in a dark corner until the screaming stops. You lose your ability to write, then your ability to speak clearly. Your words come out tangled, half-formed, full of invented meaning. You create stories, whole worlds, vivid and terrifying, but none of them are real. You no longer trust anyone. You no longer trust yourself. You see shapes in the dark, hear music in silence, and begin to believe that you're being punished not just by God, but by the very laws of reality. Eventually, the madness becomes the main thing people remember. Not the sores, not the smell, not the years of trying to hold yourself together. Just the vacant stare, the muttering, the twitching hands, and the shaking voice. You are not a person anymore. You are a warning, a story told to scare children, a figure glimpsed from the corner of the eye. But inside, some small part of you still knows, still remembers, still hurts. You know what you were? You remember trying. And that, more than the pain, more than the decay, is what makes this stage unbearable. You are aware enough to know you're losing yourself, and powerless to stop it. The disease has reached your mind, and there is no cure. Once you begin to unravel mentally, stumbling through the streets, arguing with door frames, laughing at invisible guests, your descent is no longer just a personal tragedy. It becomes a public issue. People tolerate sores and limps and strange smells to a point, but madness is where sympathy stops. You're no longer just sick, you're unpredictable. And in the Renaissance, unpredictable means dangerous. Theories about mental illness are as varied and useless as those about syphilis itself. You might be considered melancholic, a favourite term among physicians when they want to sound scientific without offering anything of substance. This diagnosis implies too much black bile in the body, an internal dampness of the soul. The treatment for this vague affliction could involve bloodletting, laxatives, or being forced to drink warm wine mixed with crushed pearls, assuming anyone thinks you're still worth spending pearls on. But if your behaviour tips further, if you begin shouting nonsense in the marketplace, tearing at your own clothes, or trying to bite the town crier, then the explanation usually leaps straight past melancholia and lands squarely on possession. Clearly, you are being influenced by the devil, or at least a particularly malevolent demon with a flair for theatrics. People begin crossing themselves in your presence. Some throw salt, a few recommend burning you outright, but thankfully, you're still pitiable enough to avoid that level of enthusiasm. The standard treatment for demonic influence is not gentle. You might be prayed over, loudly, fervently, and often in Latin. You might be beaten, not out of hatred, but as a means of driving out the spirit. It is believed that pain encourages the demon to flee. This is especially popular among lower clergy and well-meaning neighbours who've never seen an actual exorcism, but are pretty sure screaming and slapping is the key. If you're not violent, they may simply restrain you. Chains are common, ropes too. You're tied to a post or a bed, or to the leg of a heavy table, not out of cruelty, but to prevent you from hurting yourself or others. Of course, no one asks if you're actually inclined to hurt anyone. That part is assumed. Once you're labelled mad, your intentions become irrelevant. You are a threat by definition. Some towns have places for people like you, poorhouses, hospitals, or monasteries with extra cells for the spiritually troubled. These are not institutions of healing. They are warehouses, rooms with bare walls, straw-stuffed mats, and a heavy door that closes from the outside. You're fed sometimes, washed occasionally, spoken to rarely. Mostly, you're just contained, like a volatile substance, too dangerous to leave unattended. One favoured treatment is the cold water cure. The theory is that your overheated mind needs to be cooled down. And what better way to accomplish that than by submerging you in ice-cold water until your lips turn blue? Sometimes you're dunked in a barrel. Sometimes it's a trough. If the town is rich enough, maybe a stone tub. You're held under briefly, then pulled out, gasping and shivering, only to be plunged again. If you struggle, that's just proof that the treatment is working, or that the demon doesn't want to leave. There are also purges, emetics and enemas administered with alarming frequency, meant to expel the madness through whatever orifice is most convenient. You are bled, of course, always bled. Madness is a problem of imbalance, and imbalance is treated by removing blood, sometimes to the point of collapse. If you scream or thrash during the process, no one listens, you're ill. What you want doesn't matter. For women, madness is often attributed to the womb, a wandering uterus stirred up by sin, idleness, or celestial interference. The solution? Fumigation. Either from below with pungent herbs stuffed into places you'd rather not think about, or from above with sweet-smelling smoke waved under your nose to coax the womb back to its rightful place. No one ever asks the womb what it wants. If you become too much of a burden, your caretakers may stop trying altogether. You'll be confined to a small room, left to scream, rot and whisper at the corners of your mind in peace. Or you may be turned out, forced to wander until you collapse in a ditch or alley. Some communities give you a bowl and a cloak and call it charity. Others give you nothing and say it's God's will. The tragedy is that no one understands what's happening to you. Not really. They don't know that a spiral-shaped bacterium has eaten its way into your nervous system. They don't see the physical cause. They only see the symptoms, and those symptoms scare them. So they wrap them in theology, drown them in herbs, bind them in superstition. You are not a medical case. You are a spiritual anomaly, a divine punishment, a mistake. And through it all you remain dimly aware. In the lucid moments, the ones where the fog lifts just enough to remember your name, you realise the horror of what's become of you. You know that the people surrounding you don't understand, that there is no cure here, no plan, only rituals and restraints carried out by people trying to manage something they can't explain. Your brain is breaking, and all they have to offer is cold water and rope. You are left in the care of those who believe that suffering is purifying, and so you suffer, quietly, furiously, endlessly, until your mind is too far gone to notice, or your body gives out before it can get worse, which unbelievably it still might. There was a time perhaps when you imagined falling in love, getting married, starting a family, sharing bread and laughter with someone who didn't flinch at your touch. But that time is over now, buried somewhere beneath the ulcers and the rust-coloured stains on your bedsheets. Even if your body isn't yet a walking horror show, your past is caught up to you, in your reputation, in your smell, and in the soft but unmistakable gasp people make when they get too close. Romance as an option is now firmly closed. You might still feel desire, you might still hope, but the reality is that no one of sound mind is looking to marry someone with your symptoms. Even if you've managed to conceal the worst of it, a scarf here, a bit of white powder there, rumours have a longer memory than your body does. People know, or they suspect. And that's more than enough to put your name on the unofficial list of do not court under any circumstances. Marriage for most is about property, status, and legacy. Love is a luxury few can afford, and you, quite literally, can't afford anything. Your illness has made sure of that. Your work is spotty, your income is unreliable, and your appearance, depending on how advanced your symptoms are, might be actively repulsive. If you are a man, your prospects are bleak. If you are a woman, they are virtually non-existent. No family is going to offer their daughter to someone whose bones are visible through their skin. But let's say, by some twist of fate or bribery, you do manage to marry. Perhaps you're wealthy. Perhaps the other party is desperate. Perhaps they simply don't ask questions until it's too late. Congratulations, you're now legally bound to someone who probably doesn't know what they've gotten themselves into. On your wedding night, you offer more than awkward kisses and cold feet. You offer bacteria. You offer a disease so patient it might wait months before revealing itself. But once it does, it will not be ignored. Your new spouse may start to develop symptoms. Slowly, subtly, a sore here, a rash there. They may think it's nothing. You might even convince yourself it's a coincidence. But deep down, you know. You know what you've done. And there's no untying the knot you've tied around both of your bodies. You didn't just break hearts, you infected them. If a child results from the union, the tragedy deepens. Syphilis, ever generous, does not limit itself to lovers. It passes from mother to child during pregnancy. This form, congenital syphilis, is devastating. If the baby is lucky, it dies in the womb. If it survives, it may be born with disfigurements, open sores, blindness, or internal organ damage. Some develop symptoms slowly, over months or years, curved bones, deafness, lesions in the skull, all silent testaments to something passed on before the child even took its first breath. And here, society is at its cruelest. People will blame the mother, always, even if she was the one infected, even if she had no say in her husband's choices, even if she herself was the victim of deceit. The child's suffering becomes her shame. She will be branded twice, once as a syphilitic and again as a failed mother. Her worth, already diminished, will be declared void. So most people in your position simply don't marry, or if they do, it's a quiet arrangement. No church bells, no feast, just two people clinging to each other because no one else will. Sometimes they both have the disease, sometimes one lies. Either way, the union is a fragile thing, built on secrecy and the hope that no one asks too many questions. Even casual companionship becomes a luxury. Touch is dangerous. Intimacy is a risk. You pull away from affection, not because you don't crave it, but because you're afraid of what it might cost. Your body is a map of regrets and warnings. You're aware of every sore, every smell, every phantom ache that might return at the wrong moment. It's not that you don't want love, it's that your body has become the kind of thing no one wants to risk loving. There are moments when you fantasize, maybe someone who understands, maybe someone who has it too, a shared misery, a kind of strange solidarity. But even those dreams are tinged with guilt. You don't want to be the reason someone else ends up like you. You wouldn't wish this on anyone, not even your worst enemy, let alone someone you care about. And so, your world becomes smaller, quieter, lonelier. You avoid eye contact in the market. You don't linger at social gatherings. You stop hoping for letters. You stop imagining shared meals. You walk past couples and look away. Because love might be many things in the Renaissance, sacred, transactional, strategic. But when your body carries the pox, it simply isn't an option. You've been disqualified. Quietly. Permanently. Not just from courtship, but from being seen as someone worthy of closeness. And no matter how deeply you long for connection, for comfort, for something more than isolation, you carry a truth that others can sense. Your body is dangerous, and your heart, however willing, cannot change that. If you've somehow managed to find a partner willing to overlook the lesions, the rumours, and the vague scent of spoiled meat that clings to you like a second skin, then you might end up with a child. That's supposed to be a blessing, a continuation of your bloodline, a second chance at legacy in a world that's otherwise been eager to forget you. But when you carry syphilis, reproduction is less a hopeful gesture and more a biological gamble with stakes far higher than your own suffering. Because the disease doesn't stop with you. It moves forward eagerly, hungrily, passed from parent to child, body to body, without hesitation. In women, it crosses the placenta during pregnancy, quietly infecting the fetus before it ever sees the light of day. It's a hidden inheritance, one not marked in wills or passed through family heirlooms, but through blood and bone and breath. Congenital syphilis. A curse you didn't mean to give, but gave all the same. Sometimes the results are immediate. The child is born too early, or too small, or not alive at all. A stillbirth chalked up to misfortune or divine will. The mother is handed a body she cannot name, wrapped in cloth and quickly buried outside the churchyard. There is no investigation, no compassion, just the silent knowledge that something went wrong and that someone, likely the mother, must have done something to deserve it. Other times, the child survives, but it does not thrive. The symptoms vary, but they are rarely subtle. The baby may be born with a peeling rash, its skin flaking off in sheets. Lesions may dot its tiny body, around the mouth, the genitals, the eyes. Some are born blind, others lose their sight in the first few months, as the disease eats away at the tissues behind their eyes. Deafness follows for some, as fluid builds in the ears or nerves quietly dissolve. Their cries are thin, strange, unsettling, the kind of sound that makes neighbours cross themselves and midwives mutter about curses. Then there are the bone deformities, little limbs that bend the wrong way, spines that twist, skulls shaped like uneven pottery. The disease doesn't just weaken the bones, it warps them. Arms curve like sickles, legs bow until the child cannot stand. Teeth, if they come in at all, arrive jagged, notched, and spaced like crumbling tombstones. These are called Hutchinson's teeth, a term you will never hear because it won't be coined until centuries after your child is gone. If the child manages to survive the first year, and many don't, they will likely suffer from chronic infections, stunted growth, and a host of symptoms no one has words for. Seizures, brain damage, developmental delays. They'll be sick often, confused frequently, and able to understand, perhaps dimly, that something is wrong with them, even if they can't articulate what or why. You will be told it's your fault. Directly or indirectly, plainly or through implication, the blame will settle on your shoulders. If you are the mother, you may be accused of promiscuity, even if your only lover was your husband. If you are the father, you will be labelled reckless, sinful, disgusting. Your child's deformities are seen not as an act of random cruelty, but as a divine punishment made manifest. People will talk, some will say it outright. The child is suffering for the sins of the parents. You will try to care for them, of course, but you are sick yourself, and poor, and watched constantly. The help you receive, if any, will be minimal and laced with judgment. Charity with a sneer, pity with a side of disgust. Every time your child coughs, every time they stumble or cry or fail to speak when expected, you'll feel a familiar sting in your chest. Not just grief, guilt, because no matter how unfair it is, some part of you believes what they say, and still your love persists. It has to. You rock them to sleep with trembling arms. You sing when your voice holds out. You fashion toys from scraps and herbs to ease their pain. You pray, even if you stopped believing, because there's nothing else left to do. You want to give them something better, even if all you can offer is a few extra days of warmth, a little less fear, a brief moment of calm between the inevitable storms of illness. But Renaissance society doesn't make room for tragedies like yours. There are no safe places, no treatments, no understanding. Only whispers, isolation, and the quiet, unrelenting assumption that you brought this on yourself. If your child dies, they're buried quickly and quietly, with little ceremony. If they live, they'll carry the same mark you do, not just on their body, but on their soul, as judged by everyone around them. Congenital syphilis doesn't just destroy the child, it reaffirms everything society already believed about you, that you are broken, that you are dangerous, that your very blood is a warning. You are no longer just a patient or even a sinner. You are a source, a walking, breathing reminder that pain can be inherited. And every time you look at the child you love more than yourself, you'll feel that weight settle deeper into your bones. Because the worst part isn't that you gave them this disease, it's that you couldn't stop it. It's easy to feel alone in your suffering, to think that syphilis is your personal shame, your private punishment, your singular descent into rot. But you're not alone, not even close, because while you limp through muddy alleyways and pray your nose doesn't fall off during supper, the same disease is worming its way through the bloodstream of the rich, the powerful, and the otherwise untouchable. Syphilis doesn't care how embroidered your doublet is. It doesn't stop for crowns or titles or family crests. In fact, the disease seems to thrive in places lined with silk and drenched in perfume. Among courtiers and nobles, where affairs are frequent and discretion is rare, syphilis spreads with the same enthusiasm it shows in the streets. It makes no distinction between pauper and prince, only between those who suffer publicly and those who suffer behind veils, locked doors, and a loyal physician's silence. One of the earliest and most infamous victims is Charles VIII of France. He marched his army into Naples in 1495 and marched back out with something more than just military spoils. His soldiers returned to France covered in sores and ulcers, leaving a trail of infection across the continent. Whether Charles caught it himself or simply became an unintentional super spreader is up for debate, but the outbreak that followed became known as the French disease by nearly every other European country, a neat bit of international blame passing that would become a syphilitic tradition. Then there's Cesare Borgia, the ruthless son of Pope Alexander VI. Brilliant, ambitious, and utterly unburdened by conscience, Cesare was everything a Renaissance villain should be, and he likely had syphilis. Reports describe him suffering from skin lesions, open sores, and what was euphemistically referred to as a constitutional decline. His later portraits show a face half shielded by armour or shadow, and some suggest this was to obscure disfigurement. Whether from the disease itself or the mercury treatments, no one knows, but it didn't matter. He still died young and painfully. The Borgias weren't alone. Pope Julius II, one of the most powerful religious figures of the era, was rumoured to suffer from syphilis, a bit of theological irony the clergy preferred not to discuss. Records from his doctors describe symptoms that align suspiciously well: sores in the groin, facial pustules, and an inability to sit comfortably on hard surfaces for long periods of time. One can imagine the sermons on morality rang a bit hollow when delivered by a man whose own skin was quietly peeling under his papal robes. Even artists weren't spared. Benvenuto Cellini, the famed goldsmith and sculptor, wrote in his autobiography about suffering from a strange disease he believed he caught from a woman in Rome. He underwent mercury treatments and lived to tell the tale, though not without the usual suffering: bleeding gums, memory loss, and months of weakness. For someone whose legacy was built on precision and detail, the idea that syphilis nearly unstrung his mind and muscles feels especially cruel. Many others lived with the disease in secret, or died with no one willing to name it aloud. Syphilis left behind clues in death records, in ambiguous descriptions like consumption of the flesh or decay of the mind. Sometimes the symptoms were disguised as madness, or chalked up to spiritual punishment. But behind closed doors, there were collapsed noses hidden behind veils, endless sweating in perfumed bedchambers, and royal physicians applying mercury with shaking hands and desperate hope. Of course, the rich could afford better treatment, or at least more of it. Private baths, personal apothecaries, imported herbs, and access to the most creative but incorrect medical minds in Europe. Some were wrapped in furs soaked in salves, others were dosed with alchemical potions, or made to wear gemstone amulets believed to ward off unbalanced humours. None of it worked, but at least it was done in luxury. When you're dying slowly, a feather mattress and a gold-framed mirror help cushion the descent. But even the wealthiest couldn't escape the disease's effects entirely. Some nobles withdrew from public life, their appearances suddenly rare. Others continued to appear in court but wore heavier makeup, broader collars, and increasingly desperate smiles. Some, like Henry VIII, were rumoured to have it, though historians still debate that one. His erratic behaviour, paranoid delusions, and tragic losses make a compelling case, though whether syphilis was the cause or just another problem piled atop many remains unproven. In the end, what syphilis did best, and still does, was equalise. It tore through flesh and mind with no concern for status. It brought cardinals to their knees, generals to their graves, and poets to their darkest verses. It reminded a world obsessed with class and purity that all blood rots the same when given the right infection. So as you sit in your corner, bones aching, skin failing, and reputation in ruins, know this: somewhere, behind brocade curtains, a man with a title is going through the same thing. He just has someone to clean his sheets afterward. Syphilis doesn't discriminate. It just devours. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't just drop dead one day. That would be too kind, too quick. No, your death arrives the way the disease did. Slowly, methodically, without mercy. It begins in your sleep, perhaps. Your breath grows shallow. Your limbs twitch. Some nights, you don't know if you're dreaming or hallucinating. Other nights, your heart hammers so loudly in your ears, you can't tell whether it's still trying to keep you alive or just panicking. Your body gives out in pieces. Your joints, long swollen and stiff, begin to crumble under their own weight. You shuffle instead of walk. Your spine curves until you stoop, and eventually, even standing becomes a negotiation with gravity. Your vision fades, not all at once, but as if the world is slowly closing a curtain around you. Shapes blur, light burns, and finally, there's just shadow. If your eyes remain open, they do so without purpose. You lose control of your bladder, your bowels, your tongue. You can no longer eat solid food. When you try to speak, your words slur and trail off. Your once coherent thoughts, now only ghosts in your mind. Sometimes you scream. Other times you sit silently for hours, not knowing why, not remembering what you were trying to do in the first place. Your lips crack. Your teeth are gone. Your skin is paper. Your breath foul. And your touch, when anyone allows it, is cold. By now, few visit. The ones who do come out of obligation. And even they keep their distance. No one holds your hand. No one wipes your face unless paid. You are not dying in a bed surrounded by grieving loved ones. You are dying in a room that smells of mildew and body rot, while someone down the street argues about the price of onions. The world goes on, and you're not even a footnote. Eventually, you stop speaking altogether, not because you have nothing to say, but because your brain can no longer summon the language. You lie curled on your side, covered in lice and crusted linens, your breath shallow and irregular. You hear voices sometimes. You think they're real. You think someone has come, but there's no one there. Just the sounds of your own failing body, rattling lungs, dry wheezing, the occasional grunt of pain. Your death is not dramatic. It is not peaceful either. You don't die surrounded by candles and hymns. You die after days of fever, hallucination, and stench. You die drooling into a pillow that hasn't been changed in weeks. If you're lucky, someone is there when it happens. More likely, they find you later, when the smell becomes too hard to ignore. They cover their mouth and step back as they approach. Even in death, you're a source of discomfort. No one wants to touch your body, not out of fear of infection, though that's part of it, but because you're a symbol of failure, of corruption, of everything people would rather not look at. You are the physical embodiment of sin, decay, and shame. And now that you're dead, there's nothing more to be done but dispose of you as quickly and quietly as possible. If you're very fortunate, or if you die in a household with money, you may get a proper burial. Someone might pay for a priest to say a few words, to sprinkle some holy water, to pretend that your soul is going somewhere less unpleasant than your body. But even then, the ceremony will be short. The grave will be shallow. The coffin will be thin, if it exists at all. If you're not so fortunate, you're buried outside the consecrated ground. The churchyard is reserved for the respectable dead, the ones who didn't rot while foaming at the mouth. Your grave is likely unmarked, a patch of dirt near a wall or beyond the boundary fence, or in a communal pit where other unclean souls have been dumped and forgotten. Some towns burn the bodies of those who die with open sores or visible madness, just to be safe. There is no eulogy, no procession, no legacy. What you leave behind is silence. A room that will be cleaned eventually, a few stained sheets that will be thrown into a ditch, and a lingering odour that takes weeks to dissipate. Perhaps your name survives a little while longer, muttered in warning, whispered by cautious parents, repeated by a midwife who still remembers how you looked after the sores reached your face. But even that fades. You do not become a cautionary tale with a moral. You're not remembered in songs or sermons. You're just one of many, one of thousands, a body eaten alive by something no one understood, and no one cared to understand. Your pain is forgotten before the earth settles over your bones, and yet somewhere far from your grave, someone else is coughing. Someone else is discovering a sore and thinking it's nothing. Someone else is spreading it, in bed, in sweat, in ignorance. Because the disease doesn't end with you. It never did. It lives on, carried forward, whispering through flesh, waiting for the next name it will erase. For all the agony, the isolation, the public shame, and the slow collapse of your body and mind, your story does not end entirely in the grave. Though the Renaissance understood almost nothing about what was actually killing you, no germ theory, no microscopes, not even a basic grasp of contagion, your suffering didn't vanish into silence. It lingered, it echoed, and eventually it taught others. Not in your lifetime, of course, not when it could have done you any good, but still somehow your pain mattered. Your body, like many others, became part of the slow march of medical progress. After your death, perhaps someone dissected you. Perhaps they noted the damage to your brain, the strange swelling of your liver, the pocked and eroded tissue of your bones. Renaissance anatomists were only just beginning to break the taboo of opening human corpses, and syphilitic cadavers, though unsettling, offered endless lessons. There was something about the way the disease reshaped flesh, the way it destroyed from the inside, that fascinated them, even if they didn't understand it. They recorded what they saw with meticulous, if misinformed, detail. Some drew pictures, others wrote treatises in stiff Latin, giving your symptoms dignified names and speculating wildly about what foul humours or planetary alignments had caused them. These notes, full of inaccuracies and guesses, would be passed down, studied, translated, debated, and in time, they would help future physicians build a clearer picture of what syphilis actually was. Not a curse, not divine punishment, but a disease, a real one, with a real cause, a spiral-shaped bacterium called Treponema pallidum, patiently boring its way through the human body. But no one in your era knew that yet, not the apothecary who smeared you with mercury until your gums bled, not the priest who prayed over your madness, not even the rare physician with enough wealth to own books bound in leather and a library of ancient Greek guesses. They worked blind. They treated you based on theories, tradition, and superstition. You were, to them, not a patient, but a mystery, an unfolding tragedy they couldn't stop, but could at least observe. That observation, the endless cataloguing of your decay, became the foundation of real knowledge centuries later. Your body was part of a data set long before anyone called it that. One among many victims whose symptoms were so terrible, so consistent, and so thoroughly documented that eventually someone had to wonder if it wasn't divine wrath, but something smaller, invisible, microbial. And when that shift in thinking finally came, it changed everything. By the 19th century, long after your bones had crumbled into soil, physicians were finally beginning to understand infectious disease as something physical, something trackable. In 1905, German scientists identified Treponema pallidum under a microscope. 1 year later, the Wassermann test gave doctors a way to diagnose syphilis through blood. For the first time, the disease was no longer a shadow, but a shape, identifiable, measurable, and with time treatable. Penicillin arrived in the 20th century, and with it, a miracle, a real cure, one that didn't involve boiling mercury or burning herbs, or chaining people to monastery walls. A simple injection, delivered early enough, could stop the disease cold. Lives were saved, minds were spared, children were born healthy, and every one of those triumphs, every life spared the torment you endured, was built in part on the wreckage of lives like yours. You didn't survive to see that victory. You didn't benefit from it. But your body, your symptoms, Your slow death helped make it possible. Your suffering became a lesson, a textbook case, a chapter in the long, grim story of medical advancement. It's a strange kind of legacy, not one of glory, not one you asked for, but a legacy all the same. You also helped shift culture in small ways. As syphilis spread among the rich and powerful, society was forced to confront its hypocrisy. Disease, it turned out, didn't care about morals or marriage. Nobles caught it, clergy caught it, artists, merchants, soldiers, all fell victim. And slowly, very slowly, the shame began to crack. People began to whisper, less about punishment and more about cause. Treatment shifted from repentance to remedy. Not quickly, not universally, but enough. There were still lies, still blame, still suffering, but the idea that illness could be studied, that it could be understood, and someday cured, gained ground. Your body contributed to that shift. Not because anyone cared about you as a person, but because you decayed in a way that couldn't be ignored. The horror of your decline demanded explanation, and eventually, science provided one. Today, syphilis still exists, it still infects, but it no longer has to destroy. A simple test, a simple drug, lives saved in minutes, not lost over decades. Your story, long forgotten, helped build that solution.